Romans 3, verse 5. But if our unrighteousness commend the righteousness of God, what shall we say? Is God unrighteous who taketh vengeance? I speak as a man. And so what verse 5 is talking about is this: if our unrighteousness commends the righteousness of God. So our unrighteousness is a contrast with God's righteousness. Is God unrighteous who taketh vengeance? In other words, I think the argument is a little bit like this. God, it's unrighteous for you to judge me because, in fact, it is my unrighteousness that makes you look good. It's my unrighteousness that is a commendation of your righteousness. My unrighteousness makes your righteousness look even greater, and it's unrighteous for you to judge me. In fact, God, maybe you kind of owe me. Now that's why Paul says at the end of the verse, I speak as a man. In other words, is that verse God's wisdom? Is that truth? Is that sound thinking? Or is that the silliness of man? And that's what it is. That's man's foolishness. Look with me at verse 6. Paul again says, God forbid. Is God unrighteous who taketh vengeance in verse 5? Well, the answer is no, he's not. He's not at all. Man's argument that God is unrighteous in judging man is absurd. If that were true, then God couldn't judge the world, and he most certainly will. You may recall that when we were in Romans 1, just turn there with me if you would real quick in Romans chapter 1. Romans chapter 1. Now there's a lot of verses in Scripture that man hates. I tend to think that this particular phrase is one that man hates a lot. Look with me at Romans 1 verse 20. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead. And here's the part I think people really hate. So that they're without excuse. Don't you find it to be the case that when people have done something wrong, they're very good at coming up with the rationalizations as to why it really wasn't their fault? Well, sure, I ran over you, but you shouldn't have been walking on the sidewalk. I'm joking there, but my point is, have you ever, let me give you a more mundane example. Have you ever had someone snap at you and they verbally abuse you and they say, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't feeling well? Well, is that a legitimate excuse? Can you, when you're not feeling well, or is it okay if you verbally abuse people? And the point is that what man is really, really good at is excusing, rationalizing, justifying his behavior. But Romans 1:20 says, what about that? There's just no excuse. You're without excuse. And that will be incredibly apparent at the great white throne. Romans 3 verse 7, for if the truth of God hath abounded through my lie unto his glory, why yet am I also judged as a sinner? So look at what verse 7 is saying. The truth of God hath more abounded. So the truth of God was abounded even more in glory through what? My lie. You need my lie, because my lie makes your truth abound even more in glory by contrast. So God, I'm playing a really important role here. I did it for you. All that lying and wickedness and unrighteousness, I did that to commend your glory. You ought to be a little more appreciative. You can see this is all silliness, right? And so man says, why yet am I judged as a sinner? And the answer is, you're going to be.